Hello designers, let's create motion graphics for this product in After Effects. Let's begin. Here's the Photoshop file. This is a can, and the file doesn't include a background. I've enabled the visibility of the can layer. Additionally, there are 3 flavors of this soda can, each on a separate layer, with their visibility turned off. 1 can layer and 3 flavors on separate layers. If you're working with more flavors, you can add them on separate layers as well. Your task is to save this file, and then we'll import it into After Effects. In After Effects, I've created a composition sized 1080 by 1920. Next, we'll import the PSD file we just created in Photoshop. Ensure you import it as composition retain layer sizes and check editable layer size. Drag and drop it onto this timeline. Double-click on this can to open the Photoshop layers. Here are all the label layers we created in Photoshop, all currently hidden. Select all these label layers and pre-compose them by pressing Ctrl-Shift-C. Let's name it Label. Unhide these label layers. Then select the 2 label layers below and press P for position, moving them to the right side. Next, select the bottom one and move it to the right as well. Now they're all side by side like this. To indicate the centered label, let's add rulers. Press Ctrl-R on your keyboard to enable rulers, then position them where they start and end. One on the right and the other on the left. Adjust the position of the guava and lemon labels, moving them slightly to the right to create space between them. Once the positions of the other 2 layers are adjusted, go to Layer and create a new null object. Select all the label layers and parent them to this null object. Now select this null layer, press P for position. Ensure the playhead is on the first frame. Click the stopwatch next to position. Move the bar 20 frames forward. Use the shortcut Ctrl plus Shift plus right arrow key to move 10 frames forward. Press this shortcut twice. Here create a blank keyframe. Now move 10 frames forward. Move the apple label outside the rulers we created earlier and position the guava label between these 2 rulers. It will remain in this position for 20 frames. Move the playhead 20 frames forward and create another blank keyframe. After moving 10 frames forward, we'll make the lemon label appear. Position it so that the lemon label appears between the 2 rulers. Once done, return to the main composition. We want this label to be visible only on this can. To do this, duplicate the can layer by selecting it and pressing Ctrl-D on the keyboard. Move this duplicated layer above the label layer. Now select the label layer and find the Track Matte option. If you can't see the Track Matte option, press F4 on your keyboard to reveal it. Change it from No Matte to the can layer. Now you'll see that the label is only visible on the can. Go back to the label pre-composed layer, and select the null one layer. Press U to reveal all the keyframes. We'll only select the frames where the animation occurs. This is the point where the apple label moves and the guava appears. Select this point. Now let's find where the guava moves and the lemon appears. This is the frame, so select it as well by holding Shift on your keyboard. Now press F9 to apply easy ease to them. Go to the graph editor and adjust the graph as I'm doing. Okay, now go back and let's see the animation. Let's trim the workspace to 5 seconds, as our animation doesn't exceed this duration. Okay, we're done with this can animation. Now, select all these layers, the can layer, the label, and the duplicated can layer, and pre-compose them by pressing Shift-Ctrl-C on your keyboard. Let's name it Can Rotation. Let's return to the main composition and review the animation. Select the Can layer, press R for rotation, and let's rotate it a bit, giving it a slanted appearance like this. Now, we need to add elements here as well. Since the first label is Apple, let's import the Apple elements. Right-click here, Import, File, and select all the Apple elements, which are transparent PNGs. Drag and drop them onto the timeline. Now adjust their scale. Some of them are quite large, so press S for scale and reduce their size. Move them to your desired positions. Move this green apple here. Rotate this red apple like this. After adjusting the positions and scales of all three apples, let's apply the position animation to them. Select all the apple layers. Ensure the playhead is on the first frame. Press P for position and click on the stopwatch next to position. We need to identify the point at which the apple label changes into the guava layer. At this point, we'll animate the positions of all three apples individually. First, select the top red apple and move it here, creating a curved motion path. To curve the path, right-click on the keyframe, select Keyframe Interpolation, and change it from linear to continuous Bezier. Now, select the second apple layer and move its position upward. Again, curve its motion path by right-clicking on the keyframe, selecting Keyframe Interpolation, and changing it to continuous Bezier. Now change the position of the third apple as well. To curve its handles, apply the same continuous Bezier keyframe interpolation as before. Select all the keyframes, press F9 to ease them, and go to the graph editor to adjust the graph as I'm doing. Now, select all the keyframes and apply rotation animation to them as well. Press R for rotation, click on the stopwatch next to rotation, move to the next frame, and individually adjust their rotations. Repeat this for the second and third apples, ensuring the rotations are subtle. Alright, let's find the frame where the apple animation transitions into the guava animation. Move the playhead to that frame and adjust all the keyframes accordingly. Now, let's see the animation. It seems the fruit animation is happening a bit later, So let's move these keyframes a few frames backward to align with the transition point from apple to guava. Now, as the guava transitions into the lemon layer, we'll apply animation accordingly. First, identify the point where the guava animation begins. At this point, select all the layers and add a blank keyframe. Add a blank keyframe for position and rotation. We're doing this because we want the fruits to remain in the frame when the guava label is displayed. When the guava label transitions into lemon, then the fruits will move. Then, move a few frames forward and adjust the position of all the fruits. Also, adjust the rotation of each fruit individually. Now, let's preview the animation. It seems to be moving too quickly, so select all the keyframes at the end and move them slightly to the right to slow down the animation. Let's review the final animation. Select all of these element layers and pre-compose them by pressing Shift plus Ctrl plus C on your keyboard. Name this pre-composed layer Apple Elements. Return to the main composition. Select the scan layer. Go to Effects and Presets and search for Wiggle. Double-click on Wiggle Position to apply it to the scan layer. Adjust the wiggle speed and amount. Change the wiggle speed to 0.5 and adjust the amount accordingly. Apply wiggle rotation to the can layer as well. Double-click on it and set the wiggle speed to 0.4 or 0.3, adjusting the amount as needed. Rotate the can layer slightly by selecting it and pressing R for rotation. Duplicate the wiggle effect applied to the can layer and apply it to the Apple Elements layer. Copy the effects by selecting them, pressing Ctrl plus C, then open the pre-composed Apple Elements layer. Select each element layer, and press Ctrl plus V to paste the effects onto them. Let's review the effect in the main composition. Now, return to the project panel and select the Apple element. Make a duplicate of it by pressing Ctrl plus D on your keyboard. Rename this duplicated layer to Guava Elements or simply Guava. Drag and drop this Guava pre-composed layer on top of the Apple Elements layer. Duplicate this Guava layer in the project by pressing Ctrl plus D on the keyboard and rename it to Lemon. Select the lemon layer and drag it onto the timeline. Now, select the Apple Elements layer. Move the playhead to the frame where the elements start to move, indicating they are going behind the scan. Trim the Apple Elements layer from the end by pressing Alt and the right square bracket. Select the Guava layer. Trim it from the start at this very point by pressing Alt and the left square bracket. Find the point where the fruits again go back behind the scan. Trim the Guava layer from the end by pressing Alt and the right square bracket. Select the lemon layer and trim it from the start by pressing Alt and the left square bracket. Double-click on the Guava layer to open it. Here, we will replace the apples with guavas. Let's proceed with the replacements. After importing the guava transparent PNGs, let's replace them with the apple PNGs. Begin by selecting the apple PNG you wish to replace. Click on the layer to select it. Now, press and hold Alt on your keyboard and drag the corresponding guava PNG onto the selected apple PNG layer. Drop it onto the layer to replace it with the guava. Repeat this process for the other apple PNGs. After replacing all the apple PNGs with guava PNGs, adjust the scale of the guava layers as needed to match the initial scaling of the apple layers. Select each guava layer and adjust its scale accordingly. After reviewing the animation in the main composition, proceed to open the lemon layer. Replace the apple PNGs with lemon PNGs by importing them and dragging each onto its corresponding layer. Adjust the scale and rotation of the lemon layers as necessary. Return to the main composition and review the animation again. The final step is to import the background. Right-click, select File, and import the background. Then, drag and drop it onto the timeline. Rotate the background by 90 degrees and adjust its scale if needed. Trim the workspace and create space to view the animation. And that concludes the process. If you found this tutorial helpful, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to Ace Designs.